The hall was alive with whispers, each voice layered with the same mixture of curiosity and superiority. Across the great chamber of the Galactic Tribunal, the representatives of countless species leaned forward in their seats, their eyes fixed on the empty space at the center. The Empire's delegation, clad in gleaming silver, radiated the smug calm of victors. They had struck first, decisively, or so they believed. The victim of their aggression was, to their minds, nothing more than a minor species from a backwater world on the galactic fringe. No fleet of note. No colonies of consequence. No reason to fear retaliation. They had called this meeting to make a spectacle, to justify their actions before the galaxy, to humiliate the humans in the very forum where peace was meant to be maintained. It was to be a clean exercise in dominance, dressed in the thin veil of legality. The charges they intended to bring were absurdly inverted, painting humanity as the aggressor for daring to resist. The whispers in the chamber reinforced the same narrative. Earth's people were reckless, emotional, incapable of surviving in the harsh order of interstellar politics. That narrative began to fracture the moment the human representative entered. Alone. No aides, no guards, no ceremonial attire. Just a single figure walking with deliberate calm, footsteps ringing out in the silence until the sound seemed to fill the air. The aliens expected pleading. They expected an appeal for mercy. What they saw instead was something they couldn't categorize. The human's face was composed, but there was no warmth in the eyes, only an unblinking focus that seemed to measure every living being in the room. He stopped in the exact center, under the tribunal's crest, and for a moment he said nothing. The quiet became heavy, oppressive, the kind of stillness that gnawed at the nerves. Then, with a voice clear enough to cut through the vast chamber, he spoke. "You attacked our home?" 4 words, without flourish, but they landed with the weight of an accusation that no legal argument could dilute. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even those who had no stake in the conflict felt the chill in the tone. The Empire's envoy shifted in his seat, a flicker of irritation breaking through his mask of confidence. The human did not rush. He began to speak again, this time with numbers, precise, exact, unembellished. The name of the colony. Its population. How many were killed in the first wave? How many in the second? How many never even had the chance to send a distress call? He did not linger on the horror. He let the facts stand naked, and in that simplicity was an accusation sharper than any rhetoric. The Emperor's representative smiled faintly, as if humoring a child. "Such is the nature of expansion," he said, his voice dripping with feigned reason. "Resources must be secured. It is unfortunate your people stood in the way." There was no visible reaction from the human. No flash of anger, no raised voice. "We stood," he said, "because it was ours. We did not ask for war. But we will answer it." The phrasing was plain, but it unsettled more than the most vicious threat would have. Several minor delegates exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected desperation. Instead, they were hearing certainty, cold, deliberate certainty. The human's gaze swept across the chamber, and those it passed over felt a subtle discomfort, as though something behind those eyes was weighing them, memorizing them. He spoke of history, not grand tales of empire, but of survival. How humanity had risen from worlds drowned in ice and fire. How they had endured plagues, starved in deserts, rebuilt after devastation. How they had fought each other in wars that stripped continents bare, and still endured. Every era, every disaster, they had emerged changed but unbroken. His tone never rose. There was no pride in the telling, only fact. And that fact carried an implication no one missed. Humanity had been tempered in adversity long before it ever reached the stars. The Empire's envoy leaned back, attempting to reclaim control. "Your kind has tenacity," he allowed. "But this is not a duel of wills. This is the order of the galaxy." The human inclined his head slightly, almost in acknowledgement, but the faintest trace of a smile touched his lips. "Order is what survives when the fighting stops," he said. "We survive." The silence that followed was unlike the polite quiet of diplomacy. It was a pause in which the balance of the conversation had shifted, though not everyone yet understood how. Somewhere in the back rows, a small world delegate whispered a warning to his aide. A predator's patience had been recognized. The human concluded without raising his voice, without theatrics. You struck the first blow. The last will not be yours. He said no more. He didn't need to. The words hung there, alive in the air, refusing to dissolve. The arrogance in the Empire's faces remained, but something had changed in their eyes. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it would grow. The chamber remained still, but the silence was no longer born of mere formality. It was heavier now, layered with the discomfort of beings who were starting to understand that the conversation unfolding was not a formality at all. The human's eyes stayed locked on the Empire's delegation, the gaze unwavering, unblinking, carrying the quiet intensity of someone who had already measured the cost of the war in full. He began to speak again, and this time the numbers carried more weight. He recited the names of the lost as though reading a ledger, each syllable clear, deliberate. The room, vast as it was, seemed to shrink with every name, every life reduced to ash under the Empire's orders. He offered no adjectives to frame them, no pleas for pity. They were presented as facts, immutable and undeniable. And facts have a way of eroding lies. For some, it was uncomfortable to hear. For the Empire's envoy, it was infuriating. He shifted in his seat, attempting to reclaim the tone of the meeting. You recite tragedies, he said, as though they absolve your defiance. You forget your place. In the order of the galaxy, species without power must yield or vanish. The human's expression didn't change. We do not yield. We bury our dead, and we rise. His voice carried no theatrical anger, only the even weight of truth. There was no effort to win sympathy. Sympathy was irrelevant to what was coming. He spoke then of what the colony had been before the attack. It was not a military installation. It was not a fortress. It was a living place, fields, homes, music that carried through open streets at night. Not a world of warriors, but of builders, scientists, and families who thought themselves far from war. He did not linger on sentiment. He simply painted the picture, and the contrast with its current absence did the rest. The Empire's representative laughed softly, the sound brittle. This is what you bring here? Memories? Do you expect the tribunal to force our fleets back for the sake of your nostalgia? The human did not take the bait. I did not come to ask them to stop you, he said evenly. I came to tell you what you started. Several of the smaller delegations exchanged glances at that. The choice of words mattered. It was not a request, not an accusation, it was a warning, wrapped in precision. The human was not here to plead a case. He was here to make a statement of record before consequences arrived. Then came a pause, deliberate and unnerving. He looked directly at the Emperor's envoy, voice dropping slightly, not in volume but in temperature. You believe we will fight you as others have, by meeting your fleets where they are strongest, by matching your deployments with ours. We will not. We fight to end fights. We will not waste lives to prove we can stand in your fire. Those words landed differently. They were not the posture of a leader trying to inspire allies or reassure a frightened people. They were the quiet confidence of someone who already knew the next moves in a game the other player had not yet realized they were losing. The envoy scoffed, but there was a tightness in it now. You think defiance makes you dangerous? The answer came without hesitation. History makes us dangerous. Every time we were told to kneel, we stood. Every time we were broken, we rebuilt. Every time someone believed we were finished, they were wrong. The last war you fight with us will be the last war you fight at all. The tribunal remained motionless, the weight of the exchange pressing on every mind in the room. Some were calculating the truth behind the human's words. Others were already considering what it would mean for their own borders should the Empire fail. The human did not attempt to sway them. His message was not aimed at the chamber as a whole, it was directed at one audience, and that audience was listening whether they admitted it or not. When he finally spoke again, his tone was unchanged, still calm, still level. You have made the gravest error a conqueror can make. You believed your target incapable of becoming your equal. You will discover, too late, that we are not your equal. We are your conclusion. The words settled into the silence like a stone into deep water, no splash, only ripples that spread outward and lingered long after the sound was gone. The Empire's envoy looked away first. The human's next words came slowly, measured not for effect but for precision. As we speak, he said, events are already in motion. You may believe this chamber to be insulated from the truth, but it will find its way in. The first interruption came in the form of a quiet chime at the edge of the hall. An aide to one of the neutral delegations leaned toward their superior, whispering urgently. Across the room, similar murmurs began to rise. The human continued without looking away from the Empire's table. Your fleets, your supply routes, your deep space stations, they are not as untouchable as you've believed. We have no need to challenge you where you are strongest when we already stand where you are blind. The envoy smirked, though the expression was strained. You claim much for a species with a handful of warships. Warships are only one kind of weapon, the human replied. We learned long ago that the battlefield is rarely where the fight is decided. You built your empire on the assumption that the first blow breaks resistance. You've never faced one who uses the first blow to learn everything about you. A report was placed before the Emperor's representative. His eyes narrowed as he scanned it, briefly, involuntarily betraying the first hint of unease. Outlying patrols had gone silent. Long-range trade convoys had failed to arrive, with no distress calls, no debris, nothing but absence. The human's gaze didn't waver. When your ships vanish, you will assume it is chance. When your communications fail, you will think it is sabotage. By the time you realize it is all the same hand, it will be too late to take it back. More aides entered the chamber, quietly delivering updates that spread the tension further. The human ignored the movement, speaking as if reciting a fact no one could alter. We knew the war began the moment your first missiles fell. Our response was not to match your fleets, it was to dismantle them without you noticing. Fuel depots, gate relays, automated foundries, your pillars are already being removed piece by piece, without a single one of our soldiers standing in front of your guns. The envoy's smirk had vanished entirely now, replaced by the calculated stillness of someone realizing the situation had shifted beyond their control. You are bluffing. The human's voice was steady, almost conversational. Bluffing is for those who need the other side to believe them. I am telling you what is happening so you understand why your next move will not matter. A low hum passed through the hall as a holoscreen flickered to life on one of the far walls, unbidden. Grainy but unmistakable images appeared, an imperial shipyard, one of the largest in its sector, engulfed in silent fire. There was no battle, no visible attackers, only the collapsing frames of half-built warships drifting into darkness. The feed cut abruptly, leaving an afterimage of ruin on every retina view. This, the human said, is not the beginning. This is what you failed to notice until now. While you sat here, congratulating yourselves, the tools you rely on to keep your empire in motion have been removed from your reach. You may still hold fleets, but fleets without fuel are monuments. You may still hold gates, but gates without control are prisons. And you may still hold territory, but without the ability to reach it, you hold nothing at all. There was movement now among the smaller delegations, calculated whispers, sudden interest. Some were beginning to measure the Empire's strength as something less than permanent. The human was not asking them to take sides, he was letting them see for themselves which way the balance was shifting. You attacked our home, he continued, believing the damage would be contained. It will not be. We do not seek your worlds. We do not seek your people. But we will strip from you the power to harm us, or anyone, again. A final chime sounded from the Empire's console. This time, the Emperor's representative didn't look at the message. His eyes were fixed on the human, and for the first time, they showed something more than irritation. They showed recognition. The fight he had expected was not the one he was in. The tension in the chamber no longer lingered in the background, it pressed in on every occupant, an invisible weight that made each breath feel measured. The Empire's delegation shifted uneasily, their practiced expressions beginning to fracture under the steady flow of new reports slipping into their hands. The human didn't move, didn't glance toward the flashes of data. His posture remained unchanged, as if he had already anticipated every word they were reading. "You still think this is about ships and weapons?" he said, voice low but carrying. "But the weapon that will undo you is understanding. We know what you value, what you depend on, and what you cannot afford to lose. We have touched each of those without warning, without leaving you the comfort of knowing when it will happen again." A faint tremor of unrest spread through the alien envoys. Several had begun tapping commands into their own consoles, perhaps to verify the streams of information they were overhearing. None of it was officially confirmed, but the pattern was too precise to be coincidence. The human's tone didn't shift into threats. Instead, it carried the steady cadence of inevitability. In the far corner, a sudden commotion broke the fragile stillness. One of the Empire's allied representatives muttered something sharp to the Emperor's envoy before stalking out. The human didn't follow the motion with his eyes. "Your power rests on the belief that you cannot be touched," he continued. "That belief is already broken. Your enemies know it. Your allies are beginning to see it. And your own citizens will soon feel it." A holoscreen flared again, this time unfiltered by the Tribunal's protocols. It showed a planetary defense array, massive orbital platforms circling a world deep in Imperial space. One by one, without visible fire, their lights went dark. No explosions, no debris, just silence, as though something had reached inside and turned them off. The image cut away to black. The human spoke into the silence that followed. "This is restraint. We take only what we choose. We strike only where we intend. And we do not harm those who have no part in the fight. You will not be able to say the same." The Empire's envoy leaned forward, his voice taut. "You call it restraint to cripple us while pretending to stand on moral ground?" The reply came without hesitation. "I call it precision. You destroy for the sake of fear. We destroy only to end the need for it." The words carried the kind of weight that made several smaller delegations shift in their seats. Morality in war was rare, proof of it rarer still. Yet the human's delivery left no doubt that every strike had been deliberate, every target chosen for purpose, not spectacle. The implication was clear: if they had wanted to cripple civilian life, it would already be done. The envoy's hands tightened on the table. "Even now, you stand here instead of fighting. Why?" "To give you the choice," the human said. "What comes next is decided by your answer, not by our ability. You already know we can finish what we've begun." Another feed came online, this one from the Empire's own capital defense network. The view looked down on the planet's surface from high orbit. At first, nothing seemed unusual, until the black silhouettes of massive vessels faded into view above the city lights curve of the world. They had not arrived. They had been there, unseen, the whole time. Gasps rippled through the chamber. The human did not look toward the screen. "These ships will not fire unless you force them to. They are here so that you understand this is not a distant fight. It is already at your heart." The envoy's expression was a careful mask, but the stillness of his movements betrayed the truth. The calculus of victory had shifted to the calculus of survival. "You can end it now," the human said quietly, "with words. Or you can wait, and it will end without you." The chamber had grown so quiet that the faint hum of the tribunal's systems was all that could be heard. For the first time, no one doubted the human could make good on every word. The silence was no longer the calm of procedure. It was the stillness of those who understood they were standing on the edge of an irreversible choice. The human's presence in the center of the chamber had not shifted, yet it felt heavier, as though the weight of his words alone was bending the air. The Empire's delegation, once so composed, now carried the subtle stiffness of those who knew they had been cornered without a battle being fought. "This ends now," the human said, each syllable deliberate. "You will withdraw from every system you have taken that was not yours. You will return what you stole, not as a gesture, but as a condition of your survival." The Emperor's envoy inhaled slowly, searching for some semblance of leverage, but before he could speak, a new feed appeared in the chamber. It was not from the human side, it came from the Empire's own secure network, overridden without warning. Massive orbital fortresses, symbols of their dominance, were shown in sharp clarity as one after another fell dark. In each case, the lights vanished before a single defensive weapon could fire. The strikes were clean, surgical, and absolute. This, the human continued, is only a fraction of what we can do. We could shatter your fleets, silence your worlds, erase your defenses. We have chosen not to, for now. His gaze moved across the faces of the tribunal, making it clear the choice was intentional, not a sign of limitation. The envoy's tone was brittle. If you hold such power, why offer terms at all? Because we are not you, came the immediate reply. We do not need to reduce you to ash to prove victory. We want you to understand the cost of what you've done so that you will never repeat it. The logic was irrefutable, but it was more than logic. It was a sentence delivered without the pretense of diplomacy. The Empire's allies shifted uncomfortably, knowing the display had undermined any confidence they once had in Imperial invulnerability. For the first time, the possibility of a galaxy where the Empire's word no longer carried fear began to take shape. You called us prey, the human said, voice sharpening just enough to cut through the thick air. You saw our home as a target. You believed we would break, and that belief was your greatest mistake. We are not your subjects. We are not your territory. And we are not afraid of you. The envoy's lips parted as if to respond, but the human spoke over him, calm yet absolute. If you ever touch our home again, you will have no home left to defend. You will vanish so completely that future historians will speak of you only as a cautionary tale. Another feed appeared, this one not of destruction, but of human ships hanging in perfect silence above the Empire's most fortified worlds. No weapons fired, no demands broadcast. Just the quiet, undeniable truth that they were there, unstoppable and waiting. It was a demonstration of restraint as much as power, the kind that made even the most hardened military minds in the chamber realize that this was not a war the Empire could afford to test further. The Emperor's envoy finally spoke, his voice carrying the faint edge of someone tasting defeat. We will consider your conditions. You will not consider, the human said. You will agree here, now, in front of witnesses. And you will honor it. The pause that followed was long enough to feel like a held breath. Then, without ceremony, the envoy gave the smallest nod. Formal assent followed, the words sounding brittle against the backdrop of what had just unfolded. The surrender was recorded, logged, and sealed into the tribunal's archives. The human didn't smile, didn't show satisfaction. He simply turned to leave, his parting words falling like the final stroke of a blade. We didn't come here to win. We came to teach you why you should never make us fight. As he walked out, no one in the chamber moved or spoke. The image of him leaving, unguarded yet untouchable, would remain in their minds long after the record was archived. And in the quiet that followed, every member of the tribunal knew the same truth. The Empire had not just been defeated. It had been taught fear.